Welcome to GovCon Clarity with Dr. Lori Smith, where strategies replace guesswork and readiness replace wishful thinking. With over 4 decades inside government systems, Dr. Lori breaks down what agencies actually evaluate: capacity, compliance, and credibility. If you're ready to compete at the federal level, not just apply, this is where clarity begins.
Over the last episode, we named the Readiness Gap, and we've looked at how agencies evaluate your business. So today, I want to ask you something directly, and I need you to be honest with yourself when you answer. If a federal contract landed on your desk tomorrow, could you execute it? Not theoretically, not I think so. Could your business, as it operates right now, actually carry that weight? Because here's something I wish more people would say out loud. One of the most dangerous moments for a small business isn't when you lose a contract. It's when you win one you weren't ready for. Revenue doesn't fix what's broken. Revenue turns up the volume on whatever already exists. So if your foundation is solid, revenue makes you stronger. If your foundation has cracks, revenue will find every single one of them. So today, I'm giving you the framework to see those cracks clearly and the roadmap to start fixing them. Welcome to GovCon Clarity with Dr. Lori Smith. I'm the CEO and founder of AccuElegant LLC and Soaring Our Seeds Empowerment. And in this episode of our Readiness Gap series, and honestly, this is the episode where everything should start to click. This is where the concepts from parts 1 and 2 become something you can actually use. So let me connect the dots. So in episode 1, we said most small businesses aren't unqualified. They're unstructured. Federal contracts don't create structure. They reveal whether structure exists. And then in episode 2, what we talked about is we looked at your business through the agency eyes and talked about the 3 evaluation factors. We talked about technical capability, past performance, and I sort of rolled price up into that responsibility, which is also inclusive of the responsibility determination that acts as a pass-fail gate before award. And we called out the dangerous assumptions like thinking certifications equals readiness, or that you'll figure out systems after you win. So here's the bridge. In part 1 was about your internal truth. Part 2 was about the external standard. And this episode is about the space between those 2 things. I call that space the readiness gap. And understanding it, measuring it, and closing it on purpose is the single most important thing you can do for your business right now. And just to connect this back to what agencies actually evaluate, your operational backbone shows up in your technical capability. Your governance spine shows up in your responsibility profile, and your capacity guardrails show up in both your performance and your responsibility story. So what does ready enough actually look like? I want to introduce a concept that takes some of the pressure off: minimal viable readiness. It's not perfection. Nobody's asking you to have everything figured out before you take your first step. Minimal viable readiness is the minimal set of systems, governance, and capacity you need to deliver a contract without your business or you falling apart in the process. So think of it as 3 pillars. Your first pillar is your operational backbone, how work actually moves from award to invoice. Second, your governance spine, how decisions get made, documented, and defended. And third, your capacity guardrails, how you protect bandwidth, both your teams and your own. If any of these are missing or shaky, a contract can look like a blessing on the letterhead and feel like a crisis in real life. So let me walk you through each one and listen for the one that hits closest to home. Pillar 1, operational capacity. Now, this is your business ability to deliver consistently, not just when you are having a great week, right? But every week. It shows up in your processes, in your workflows, in your project management, and how you track performance. The real question is, does your delivery depend on you personally remembering what needs to happen next? Because if it does, your operational capacity is fragile. It doesn't matter how talented you are. And so here's what minimal viable looks like operationally. You got a documented delivery process. You got some kind of project tracking that reels and actually gets used. And if it's simple, roles are clear, even if people wear multiple hats. And there's a defined way to handle changes, issues, and communications. And let me paint you a picture. A small consulting firm with 3 people wins a task order. They've got the skills, no question, but there's no documented process. Every deliverable gets rescued at the last minute. The founder is approving things at midnight. Nothing is standardized. So from the outside, it looks like growth. From the inside, it's drowning. And that's not readiness. That's survival mode dressed up as opportunity. So here's your test. If you disappear for 2 full weeks, would the work keep moving? Could someone new join your team and figure out how things work without you having to narrate every step? If the answer is no, or probably not, without a lot of panic and phone call, that's your gap talking. Pillar 2, governance capacity. This is how your business make decisions, document them, and defends them when somebody asks questions. And somebody will always ask questions. Governance sounds like a big corporate word, but for a small business, it just means who decides what, how do we keep a record of it, and what do we do when something goes wrong? That's it. Minimal viable governance means you got a simple decision matrix. Who approves what, at what dollar amount, with what documentation. You got basic policies for a few critical areas like conflicts of interest, subcontractor oversight and quality control. And you keep a record of major decisions so you can explain them later if you need to. You don't need a 200-page manual, I promise you, but you do need clarity, because when every single thing routes back through one person with no written trail, you are one bad flu, one family emergency, or one surprise audit away from chaos. And in federal work, governance isn't a nice to have. It's something agencies can and often do examine through audits, responsibility determinations, and contract oversight. Your test? Well, if a contracting officer or an auditor asks you to explain how a specific decision got made and show them the paperwork supporting it, could you do it? If that question makes your stomach tighten even a little, that's your governance gap. Pillar 3 is emotional and leadership capacity. And I'm going to talk about this one directly because the business world almost never does. Federal work is demanding. If your plan for handling more work is, I'll just push harder, you're planning to build on top of exhaustion. And exhaustion is not a foundation. Emotional capacity is your ability to handle pressure, setbacks, and growth without living in constant crisis mode. It shows up in how you respond to stress, whether you can actually rest without guilt, and whether your leadership is something your body and mind can sustain over months and years, not just days. For women and veteran founders, this is where overfunctioning lives. We've been trained to carry everything, to compensate, to absorb the slack, to just work hours instead of building better systems. And I'm not criticizing that because, hey, I'm naming it with compassion because I've seen it, I've lived it, and I've watched it cost brilliant people their health, their families, and sometimes, their businesses. The minimal viable capacity means your realistic bandwidth. You have a plan for surge periods that doesn't require you to sacrifice everything. And you're not the only person who can make every decision. In federal contracting, chronic overfunctioning isn't a badge of honor. It's a risk factor. Now, why does this gap exist in the first place? Well, a few reasons, and I think you'll recognize them. Is first, our entrepreneurial culture celebrates hustle over architecture. We applaud the grind, we glorify doing it all. But here's what more than 40 years in this space then taught me. Hustle isn't a strategy. It's the absence of one. Structure feels slower, at the beginning. I know it does, but it accelerates you later. Hustle feels fast now, but it collapses the moment things get real. The second is the marketplace pushes you to move before you're ready. You need revenue now. You need that contract now. Scale now. And look, the financial pressure is real. I'm not dismissing it, but chasing a contract you're not ready to deliver is more expensive than not winning it at all. Performance failures, compliance problems, reputation damage, those follow you in this marketplace. So the next proposal doesn't erase them. And third, most business development training focus on the outside stuff. How to find opportunities, write proposals, network, pitch. Very few programs talk about the internal infrastructure of readiness, the systems, governance, capacity, and human sustainability that determine whether you can actually deliver on what you win. That's the gap this podcast exists to close. And a quick note before we go further, nothing in this series is legal, tax, or accounting advice. It's based on my more than 40 years of federal logistics and contracting experience, and is meant to help you ask better questions. Okay, let's do something practical. I want to walk you through a quick self-assessment. This isn't a test. There's no pass or fail. It's a clarity tool, something to help you see where you're strong and where you need, to build. You can do this in your head, on your paper, on your phone, whatever works. I want you to rate each statement on a scale of 1 through 5. 1 means not really true for us. 3 means sometimes, or we're working on it. And 5 means that it's consistently true. Operations. Our delivery process is documented, and someone other than me can follow it. We track work and deadlines in a consistent system. We can accurately estimate timelines and labor needs. If I were gone for 2 weeks, things would, keep moving. A new team member could figure out how we work without me having to explain everything. Governance. We know who approves what and at what threshold. We document key decisions and why we made them. We have policies we actually follow, not just ones we wrote and forgot. We know our biggest risk areas and have at least a basic plan for them. We could show accountability to a client or auditor. And the last one is capacity. I can rest without panicking most of the time. I make decisions proactively instead of waiting for a crisis. My leadership doesn't run on adrenaline. I have support I actually use when things get hard. I know my real bandwidth, and I don't blow past it without a plan. Now I want you to look at your numbers. The pillar with the lowest score, that's where your next bill lives. Not a judgment, just a direction. Here's the important part. You don't try to fix everything at once. That's actually the opposite of readiness. It's scattered activity dressed up as progress. You pick one pillar, the lowest one, and you focus there for 90 days. If operation was lowest, spend the next 90 days documenting your core delivery process, setting up real project tracking and reducing your key person dependency for at least, one critical function. If governance was lowest, define decisions rights for your most frequent decisions. Draft one basic policy document, and then build a documentation habit you actually maintain weekly. If capacity was lowest, identify one structural support, a mentor, a peer group, a rest practice, anything, and protect it, with that same seriousness you give, the client work. One pillar, 90 days, real progress. That's how readiness gets built. Not through some heroic sprint, but through steady, intentional investment in the part of your business that needs it most. So let me leave you with this. The readiness gap isn't something to be ashamed of. Every business has one. The question is whether you are honest about where yours is and intentional about closing it. And you don't have to be perfect to do federal work, but you do have to be honest about what's built and what isn't. So if you want structural guidance, take the federal readiness assessment in the show notes, or schedule a clarity assessment with me at AccuElegant. And what we'll do is that we'll map your gaps together and build you a 90-day plan. Now, in the next episode, we're going deeper. I'm going to show you how to build your first governance framework. And I promise you, it does not require a boardroom, a board of directors, or a 100-page policy manual. It requires clarity, intention, and a willingness to lead with discipline. This has really been great. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm Dr. Lori Smith, and this is GovCon Clarity. Readiness protects what ambition pursues, so build what holds the opportunity and what holds you. Until next time, bye-bye for now.